Hello everyone. Today's video is on two young women who would go missing just weeks apart, not far from each other in the same area of southwestern Ontario. 25-year-old Lois Hanna was born February 3rd of 1963 to her parents Olive and Ernest, and was a former Miss Midwestern Ontario beauty queen. She was said to always look impeccable, her deep brown eyes often highlighted with eyeshadow, and her curly brown hair styled to perfection. She was said to be very friendly, and if she noticed someone was being ignored at a dance, she'd always be the one to drag them onto the dance floor. After completing her fashion studies at Fanshawe College, Lois worked at Mac G's, a women's clothing store in Kincardine, a town along Lake Huron. She was described as a responsible person who was very happy at her job. She was outgoing and a very people-oriented person who loved her family. Being the youngest of 5 children, having 4 brothers, she was raised on a farm outside Holyrood, just north of Lucknow. During the Canada Day weekend in July of 1988, Lois would spend it in that town of Lucknow, a small town about 200 kilometers northwest of Toronto. It was the town's 130th birthday, and the entire community was celebrating with beer gardens, dances, and happy reunions. On the night of July 3rd, Lois would attend the Celebrate in '88 reunion dance at the Lucknow Arena, located at 662 Campbell Street. Around 300 other people would attend, including friends and family. As it neared midnight, Lois began getting tired, and she actually had to work in the morning, so she pecked her brother Dave on the cheek, waved goodbye to her friends, and left the arena around 11:45 p.m. in her red and gray 1987 Pontiac Grand Am. The route she'd drive home was about 20 minutes down Highway 86, which would take her to her home in Kincardine, a town of around 6,300 residents, which she had only moved to a few months prior after her father had passed away. Lois would arrive home to her brick bungalow located at 286 Nelson Street at approximately 12:15 a.m., which was now July 4th, and she would end up parking in the driveway. But as morning came and the store owner, whose name was Deb, would arrive around 11 a.m., she would realize that the store was still locked up and no one seemed to be there, which was very odd because Lois was meant to be there around 10 a.m. to open the shop up. And she, as I said, loved her job, she was extremely responsible, and this was very out of character. So Deb would end up waiting another 15 minutes, and when 11:15 rolled around and Lois still didn't show up, she began to get worried. As I said, Lois loved her job and her coworkers, and she treated the store as if it was her own. She also only lived a 3-minute drive away, so it wasn't like she could have been held up by traffic, and she would never have either, arrived late, or if she was going to be late, she would have called someone to let them know. She would never have been a no-call, no-show, unless something extremely dramatic had happened. So her worried boss would end up calling her home, however, she would get no answer. She would then begin to try calling Lois's friends, and she'd eventually get a hold of one of Lois's brother's girlfriends. And this girlfriend would then call her brother Dave. And at first, Dave thought that everyone was just overreacting and that his sister must just be in town somewhere. But as the afternoon came and still no one could find Lois, and his girlfriend ended up calling him back to update him on the situation, that, Lois hadn't showed up, still no one could find her. That's when Dave finally realized that something was most likely very wrong. While Dave was rushing to Kincardine, her boss would end up calling a part-time coworker to go over to Lois's house and check there to see if she was there. Everyone was trying to still think of like the best case scenarios. Maybe she had somehow overslept after, exhausting herself at the party the night before, or maybe her phone was broken so she couldn't call someone and tell them what was going on. Or there's always a chance that maybe she was sick or there was a medical issue going on. However, this coworker would show up to Lois's home to find a very strange scene. Lois's car was said to still be parked in the driveway of her home, as if nothing was amiss. The coworker then looked into the window and noticed that the lights were all on, along with the TV was still playing. All of the doors also appeared to be locked. And when this coworker knocked on the door, banged on the windows, no one came and answered. So the coworker would end up breaking through a bathroom window that was unlocked, fearing that, Lois maybe had a medical episode or something inside, because her car was there, her TV was still playing, it seemed like she was home. And inside, the coworker would find the TV still playing, and she'd also find a half-drank cup of tea that was now cold sitting on the kitchen counter. The pink outfit that Lois had wore to the dance the night before was neatly hung in her closet. Her purse and her keys were found in the china cabinet where she always kept them. However, a peach nightgown with a matching robe that she always wore at night were missing. And Lois herself was nowhere to be found. And the chances of her going somewhere in her nightwear with her makeup not done, her hair not done, no jewelry on, not a full outfit for going out, was unheard of. That was not like Lois at all. She was one of those girls who always looked like she stepped out of a magazine when she left her front door. So the chances of her going somewhere either on foot or with someone else wearing her pajamas basically was just very, very odd. Lois was also said to be very meticulous about writing notes. So if she was going to go somewhere, she would have left a note somewhere to let someone know. And the fact that her pajamas were missing, there was a cup of tea that was half drank sitting on the counter still, all of her belongings like her purse, ID, like keys for her car, all of that stuff were still in her home. And her vehicle was in the driveway, the lights were on, the TV was playing as if she had, gotten home and settled in for, her cozy night. She'd went through all of her normal night routines, but then she wasn't there. The combination of all of that is what really set in stone for everyone that something very, very bad must have happened to Lois. Something truly wasn't right here. And it wasn't as if she had come home from the party, opened her door to, an attacker laying in wait, because it seems like she went through her normal night routine. She was said to always get home, put her pajamas and her robe on, make a cup of tea, turn on the TV, relax. And it seems like she had time to do all of that before something happened. There was also no signs of a struggle that appeared throughout the home. Nothing was knocked over. There wasn't, an extra glass to indicate that someone was there with her. And keep in mind, all of the doors were still locked. So it was as if she just vanished into thin air. But after Dave would report his sister missing to the police, he didn't feel like they were taking it very seriously. An officer would eventually show up, but after going over everything, he pretty much just said, well, Lois seems to have probably gone off somewhere and she'd eventually return. So because police weren't taking her disappearance seriously and weren't searching for her, the family would end up setting up a base camp out of Lois's home. And for the first 5 days, family and friends would organize their own searches, including bringing in a dive team to go search Lake Huron nearby. It was said that more than 100 people joined in to search in the sweltering July heat. And Dave would continue to beg police to release his sister's disappearance to the media so that they could start spreading the word. It wouldn't be until nearly a week into her disappearance that local police would ask the OPP, which is the Ontario Provincial Police, to help them. Now, a big issue I have with this case is if you've ever watched anything to do with disappearances or murders or any kind of true crime kind of stuff, you'll realize that a crime scene can't be tampered with. You want to seal that place off and you want only professionals to come in. And even when they come in, they're also, affecting the crime scene. They're diluting any evidence that can be found when they go into it. And if you just heard me say, because police weren't searching, the family set up a base camp in Lois's home, which was the crime scene, meaning there were tens and tens of people coming in and out of her home, trampling through the crime scene in a very JonBenet Ramsey fashion, because a very similar thing happened in that case. And that was all because police didn't take this case seriously. They didn't come in, they didn't tape off the crime scene and do their investigation immediately. And I'm sure because it was the 80s that the family and friends didn't know about, tampering with crime scenes to the extent that we do today. They didn't know about how you can affect evidence that may be found. They were just trying to do their best to try to search for their missing loved one because police weren't doing anything. And this would eventually be agreed upon in an article from 2007, where a family member would say, quote, "Using the house was not the right thing to do because we destroyed any evidence that might be there, but we had no help. The Kincardine police were running interference against us. It was just a case of the lesser of two evils. If there was any chance of finding her, it had to happen right away." End quote. And that is because, the first 48 hours are the most important. The first couple hours when someone goes missing is the most important. And by the time anyone had noticed that Lois was missing, she had been missing most likely for 12 plus hours. So the family was doing what they could to search. However, they most likely destroyed a lot of evidence that might have been able to be found. But after that week, when police started to actually take things seriously, investigators would end up finding 2 drops of blood inside of Lois's home, which were found on a wall near a side entrance door, which led to a lot of theories of the chances of someone following Lois home from the party that night, or the possibility of someone stalking her and watching her home. Police divers would eventually be brought in to the Kincardine Harbor on July 9th, which was around 5 blocks from Lois's home. Exhaustive land and water searches would take place for months. Using dive teams, helicopters, infrared cameras, and hundreds of witness statements were collected. They'd eventually search an abandoned farmhouse south of Kincardine around June 10th. Her brother Dave saying, quote, "Everything was just good. Everything was good right up until the time she walked out of the arena." End quote. Despite Lois's vehicle being found because it was still sitting in her driveway, police are still seeking information if anyone can remember seeing her car on the night of July 3rd to 4th in the areas between Lucknow and Kincardine. Resources such as Crime Stoppers would eventually do coverage of Lois's case, and posters would also blanket the area. However, I wasn't able to find that Crime Stoppers video. A year after Lois disappeared, a woman would end up finding 4 human teeth attached to bone while swimming in the harbor. I can't imagine how terrifying that would be. And this woman was terrified because she ended up throwing the teeth back into the water because she was so shocked by the discovery. However, she would then wait 4 days to report this to police. Now, I'm not sure if police ever found these teeth or they found whose teeth they were. There was no information on that. If you know that, please let me know down below. In January of 1989, 2 sketches would be released of men seen leaving MacG's the same morning Lois didn't show up for work. The store wasn't open yet when these men were leaving the store, and they wouldn't have had a key. So it's unknown who these men were and how they gained access to the store, or what it could mean to Lois's disappearance. At that year mark, police had taken more than 700 statements and were also said to have completed 700 duties related to the case. They'd also release a partial description of a full-size car parked near Lois's home the night she had disappeared. However, it wasn't able to find an exact description for this either. It was just said to be a full-sized car. In 1990, a body would end up being found in the St. Clair River wrapped in plastic, bound at the waist and knees and weighed with a cement block and badly decomposing. This body was said to be clad in a nightgown and slippers, and a lot of people were fearing that this body was Lois. However, it has been decades and her case is still not solved, so my best guess is that it wasn't Lois's body. But again, this is one of those leads that I read in a newspaper article that I never seen a conclusion to. 10 years later, in the summer of 1998, DNA testing was able to determine that those 2 drops of blood found in Lois's home belonged to an unknown male. It was then announced that a suspect had been identified that hadn't been ruled out yet. A year prior, a reward for $25,000 would be put out by the OPP in hopes that the case would be solved. Lois's mother, Olive, would also make a plea to the public, saying, quote, "My daughter Lois has been missed for 9 years. Lois is my only daughter, and I know she wouldn't leave without telling me or my boys. One weekend she was with us, and the next morning she was gone, without a trace. She was 25 when she left, and she would now be 34. I'm appealing to anyone who could help find my daughter. It has been a lonely and sad time without her." End quote. Nearly 40 years later, Lois's brother is still fighting for answers. They would end up doing an investigative documentary on Hulu's show, Sasha Reed and the Midnight Order. But unfortunately, when I tried to watch it, it was locked, so I could only watch it in the US. And I don't have a VPN, so I wasn't able to watch it. From what was released in the trailer, however, it seems like it had come out that police were actually able to narrow down their investigation to one suspect who didn't have an alibi the night of the dance and also failed a polygraph test. And it seems like Lois's brothers know this person's name. However, as a lot of these Canadian cases go, police seem to have told them that if they release the name of this individual, that it'll ruin their investigation. So that person is currently unknown to us. However, if this was a case in the US, I feel like this person's name would be plastered everywhere and would allow tips to come in then, because then people would know that there's a possibility he could be involved, and maybe there's someone out there who knows something, but they don't know this individual's involved, so they don't know to come forward, which is an issue that I have with authorities not releasing information like individuals' names. Like, if you want to keep certain evidence close to the vest, that's one thing, but then, like, how are you supposed to put in tips if you don't know someone's involved, you know? Lois's case is just such a strange case when I started diving into it and finding all of the old articles on it and the information that we do have. It does seem as if she arrived home, started her night routine, and then something interrupted that. Something changed her plans to go to bed that night. But then there was no signs of a struggle in the home, which is very odd, which makes you wonder, did someone show up and knock on the door that she may have known and let in willingly? Or was someone laying in wait inside of her home for her and decided to come out after she'd started her night routine? But then you'd think there might have been some kind of signs of a struggle. Maybe the tea could have got knocked over, or just something seemed out of place. Maybe a chair was like moved a weird way, but it seems as if nothing, not one thing was out of place according to family. And you think they would have been hypervigilant at that moment, trying to figure out where she was, and they would have noticed something out of place. Police weren't able to properly search the home because all the evidence was most likely destroyed. Things would have been moved around by the time they got to it a week later, since there was so many people in the home. So police weren't seeing the crime scene as it was, the night she disappeared. but according to family, nothing was amiss there. The one thing I do find so strange, though, is the fact that if she was kidnapped, how did the killer relock the doors? Because according to the friend that went and had to break into the home through a bathroom window, all the doors were locked, unless some way, somehow, the intruder forced her to go through that open bathroom window and then went out after her. It doesn't make sense to me. I feel like someone could just run then in that time span, but stranger has probably happened. But it is a very weird fact to me that there was blood allegedly found, drops of blood from an unknown male by the back door. And then in this new documentary, they're saying there was one male identified. So I'm wondering if that's the same person, because I haven't seen information connecting the two, because the information is kind of limited. And I really wonder if in that documentary that I can't watch, if they actually explained more of that stuff. So if you are in the US or you have a VPN or something and you can watch that documentary, please go watch it for me and comment down below if there is more information that we don't know about, because I'm very, very curious. But what do you think? What's also so sad is that she was only 25 years old. She was 4 years younger than I am now. She was so young. She had so much life ahead of her. She was already so accomplished in her young life. And then to just vanish without a trace, as if she just poofed that night in her pajamas. But as I mentioned in the beginning, there was another young woman who had vanished nearby in the following weeks. 22-year-old Lisa Maas was born March 6 of 1966 to her parents June and Ken. She was described as a very friendly, helpful, and athletic person who was very small, standing at only 4 foot 10 inches tall and less than 100 pounds. But despite this, she was a member of the national champion lacrosse team and played soccer in high school. Because of her small stature, her nickname was Mouse, which she would later get tattooed on her shoulder. At the beginning of July in 1988, Lisa would move back home to her parents' house in Owen Sound, a town about a 3-hour drive northwest of Toronto along Georgian Bay with around 20,000 people at the time. 6 months prior, she had broken up with her husband of 2 years and had recently split up with a boyfriend, and she was actually 5 months pregnant at this point. On the morning of July 17th, Lisa would last be seen as she was leaving a house party in Woodford, Ontario. She had driven to the party with 2 female friends and a male friend, but when she would eventually want to leave, the friends would stay behind. However, what police would call a male companion would end up leaving with Lisa and driving her back to her car, because her car seemed to be parked somewhere else for some reason. And according to this male companion, he claims that, Lisa got into her vehicle and drove off towards home, and that's the last time he's seen her. 2 days later, Lisa's green 1976 Plymouth Fury would be found on a blind road running through a farmer's property near Annan and Kiefer Falls. The car had been stuck in mud, and there were indications that attempts were made to dislodge the car. It also appeared to have been ransacked. The trunk and doors were said to be open, clothing and paperwork were scattered about, and her black leather purse was missing. In the following weeks, law enforcement would search the surrounding areas. And eventually, 3 weeks later, Lisa's driver's license would end up being found in a ditch at Side Road 24 and Irish Block Road, atop of tall grass, as if it had been tossed from a moving vehicle. As you can see from the map, the license wasn't found too far away from where her vehicle was. But this area is very rural, especially back then. But no traces of Lisa would be found other than that. The next year, the search was still on, and the family would end up placing a $50,000 reward for answers. Members of the OPP's Tactical Rescue Unit would be seen rappelling down rock crevices. A German Shepherd tracking dog from Barrie's Police Services, along with 5 officers from several OPP detachments, would be brought in to search the heavily wooded area along Highway 26. Her father, Ken, would be out there as well helping, him being the gentleman on the left of this photo. Sadly, despite all of this extensive searching, Lisa nor her baby would be found.
22-year-old Lisa Maas has been missing almost a month. She was last seen July 17th in Woodford, but her car was discovered 2 days after her disappearance in a wooded area near Annan. That's where OPP and volunteers concentrated this latest search effort. Teams made up of 20 to 30 volunteers each combed the roadsides and ditches between the 2 rural communities. One of the organizers who got the volunteers together, Ruth Ann Devlin of Owen Sound, says they were looking for virtually anything.
They said that they could use the help, and if we could find anything, it would be of help. Such things as matchboxes, any kind of clues like that, that would sort of nail down the fact that the girl had been in a particular given area. So we're just out for anything we can find.
Police have already carried out a number of searches in the area, including using helicopters and dogs, but with the exception of the car, there is no other evidence of Maas. The car was taken to Toronto for forensic examination. Investigators are still conducting interviews and follow up on other possible contacts. Maas, who is 5 to 6 months pregnant, is described as 4 foot 10 inches, weighs 97 pounds, with hazel eyes, spiked blonde hair, and she has a tattoo of a mouse on her right shoulder. She was last seen wearing blue jeans and a blue sweatshirt with a Mickey Mouse on the front. OPP have put Lisa Maas of Owen Sound on the Canadian Police computer system listed as a missing person. Anyone with any information on her whereabouts is asked to contact the OPP or Owen Sound City Police. Maas, who may also go under the name Lisa Reimer, is described as 4 foot 10 inches, weighs 97 pounds, with blonde hair and hazel eyes. She's 5 months pregnant. One distinguishing mark is a tattoo of a mouse on her right shoulder. She's believed to be wearing blue jeans and a blue sweatshirt with a Mickey Mouse on the front. Maas has been missing since Sunday, July 17th. She was last seen in Sydenham Township, northeast of Owen Sound. Her car was found 2 days after her disappearance, abandoned on a seldom-used road in a wooded area northeast of the village of Annan. A police search team scoured the area where the car was found, but came up empty-handed. OPP have at this point discounted any connection with the disappearance of Lois Hanna of Kincardine.
And myself and Kincardine Police Department investigating the Lois Hanna disappearance have met and we've compared notes, but little at this time would substantiate linking the cases together.
It's not against the law for a 22-year-old to disappear, though.
No, it's not. She's just missing.
And we'd like to hear from her.
That's correct. And her parents would more than anything else.
OPP Constable Dan Razek says police will now go back to re-interview people and continue tracking down out-of-town leads. If nothing comes from that, the next step would be to bring in assistance from the Criminal Investigation Branch in Toronto.
In 1991, remains would end up being found in a remote area near Meaford, which brought hope to solving either Lois's or Lisa's cases. The remains discovered by hikers were said to be skeletal, and were in such bad shape that it was undetermined what the victim's sex even was. But considering, again, it's been decades and both of these women's cases have not been solved, I want to guess this body was not theirs. In 2006, it would be revealed that blood had actually been found in the interior of Lisa's vehicle. However, that sample was too small to test back then. But as new technology advanced, they were eventually able to test these samples and were said to identify a couple blood profiles. However, I didn't hear much more other than that. In 2007, police would announce that they'd actually zeroed in on a single suspect, after combing out 6 other suspects that they actually had over the years, which this unsettled residents thinking that there were so many people who were suspected in this area of Lisa's disappearance, and also her baby's disappearance. She was pregnant, she was 5 months pregnant, so that's never mentioned that often, but her and her unborn baby were both missing. And the fact that this person could have been living among them really unsettled residents. Turns out that her ex-boyfriend along with her ex-husband were among those who ended up being eliminated. Despite this, just like in Lois's case, police have said that they believe the suspect was familiar with the site, but they will not release the name of this suspect. They did reveal, however, that they had long suspected that Lisa had been murdered, her body disposed of, and then her vehicle left on that muddy road that was in between the farmer's crops. Police also revealed that they believe that Lisa knew her killer, which, if they know the suspect, then I feel like they would be able to connect the dots. However, the motive for her disappearance and her murder has still been unclear. In a search done in 2015 around the area where Lisa's vehicle was found, searchers would end up finding an empty Sprite can with an expiry date of 1988, which was the year that Lisa disappeared. They would also end up finding a pair of underwear, thousands of bones that they ended up having to go through and send in. I think a lot of them ended up being animal bones. But the farmer that owned the land where her vehicle was found would eventually end up halting the search because they were scared that more people would come out there, especially that weren't organized, and they would get injured on their land and then the farmer would be responsible. And it's also been said that there was specific areas that haven't still been searched in the Annan area where it was reported that summer that there was some odd foul smells, which might indicate that there could have been a decomposing body in that area. Another area that doesn't seem to have been searched is on the wooded outskirts of the Gino landfill near Annan. During a more recent search in 2023, an excavator would end up being brought in by the organization Please Bring Me Home, which we've been talking about that organization quite a bit recently. They've been involved in a lot of these cases that we've been talking about, which is amazing. They're able to provide, these searches and these excavators and things like that to these families and hopefully bring answers. This group would also be involved in a search of a cliff area where a lot of teens were known to hang out and that Lisa would most likely have been familiar with. They also brought a machine that was able to reach down and, rip apart and pick up trash that had been thrown off of this cliff because they were hoping that they'd eventually be able to find some evidence. Possibly Lisa had been thrown down there, maybe, her purse, something. Volunteers were then tasked with scouring all of these items that they brought up, trying to see if they could find remains or clothing or just some kind of evidence.
Lois Hanna and Lisa Maas never met, but they are linked together forever. The two Midwestern Ontario natives both went missing in July of 1988 under suspicious circumstances. 35 years later, Nick Oldreeve and his team of volunteer searchers and citizen sleuths from Please Bring Me Home are heading back into the wilderness in search of clues into their disappearance.
With Lois and Lisa specifically, at this time, with it being 35 years later, we're looking for scattered remains. We're looking for clothing. In both of those cases, that's really the only evidence we have to go on.
Since 2016, Please Bring Me Home has organized more than 30 searches for both Maas and Hanna as they try and bring closure to the families of both missing women. While they have found clues in those searches, they've not located either of them as of yet.
Even by not locating them, that is still evidence that we add to the pile, right? Okay, we can say with certainty they are not in this location. And it narrows down the search area each time, right?
On July 2nd, volunteer searchers will be combing an area near Holyrood for Lois Hanna. And on July 16th, Oldreeve is looking for a lot of volunteers to cover 6 locations near Owen Sound in search of Lisa Maas.
That one we need a lot of volunteers for. We want at minimum 115 people.
Oldreeve says he's always amazed how many people come out to help look for people they don't know or have no connection to, especially 35 years after the fact.
And we put a message out looking for strangers to come and search for a stranger. And it's incredible the turnout for these missing people. That I love sharing with the families.
While the OPP are not actively conducting searches for Maas or Hanna, they say both cold cases are still being actively investigated.
There's been a lot of weight behind the theory that Lisa most likely had been dumped that night after she was murdered in the area of Kiefer Falls because it was only 500 meters from where her vehicle was found. And the theory goes that the sun would have been rising pretty soon, so the killer would have then, maybe panicked, quickly tried to dispose of her body, and then drove her car down that farm lane and got it stuck, and then, went off somewhere. But then it makes me wonder, how did that individual get picked up? Was there another vehicle parked nearby that they got in? There's a lot to wonder. What I wonder is, did police ever find any footprints in the mud around her vehicle? Because that would determine possibly how many individuals were there. Did Lisa make a wrong turn and end up getting stuck in the mud there somehow and then, maybe tried to hitchhike and got kidnapped? Because if there was no other footprints there besides her own, it would make you think that the most likely scenario was that maybe she accidentally turned there, got stuck, and then, maybe hitchhiked or went off somewhere. Or is there a possibility, that someone else pulled her car in there and got it stuck, and then, there's other footprints there that aren't hers? That's what I truly wonder. That information has never been revealed. You'd think, because it was said to be money, that they would be able to find something like that back then. Maybe police have that information and just haven't released it. What I also really wonder is, what is the alibi from that male individual that drove her to her vehicle? Did he return to the party immediately after, or return somewhere else where other people can corroborate his story? Police said they had 6 individuals that they were interested in. 2 of them were the ex-boyfriend and ex-husband, so there were 4 other individuals. They ruled 3 more out then, and then there's 1 left. So who is that individual? Why won't they reveal it? And it makes me wonder, were they able to determine this individual because of the blood found in her vehicle? This is just another one of those cases, just like Lois's, where there is just such little information. It's just so confusing. But it seems like in both cases, police have suspects. Both of their cases are complete different situations. One was, driving in the middle of the night, just vanished. The other one was at home when she vanished. So I don't know if they're related at all. It's strange that they disappeared, not too far from each other in the same kind of region within weeks of each other. And they were both around the same age. It's very odd. It's very, very odd. But I want to guess it's most likely 2 different individuals that are involved in these cases. It's not the same person, but it really makes me wonder what the motive could be, especially in Lisa's case. If it wasn't her ex-boyfriend, you'd think maybe there was DV or something. She was pregnant and, one thing led to another. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So who was it? Who would kidnap a 22-year-old young woman who was 5 months pregnant? And what did they do to her is the question. And why? And then also in Lois's case, she was 25 years old and she was just at home drinking her tea and getting ready for bed after having a great night out with family and friends that weekend. Who did something to her and why? Lisa's 95-year-old father would later say in an interview with W5 in 2019 that there were a lot of rumors at the time, including Lisa being put in a septic system or fed to pigs, and the horrific theories just went on and on. And sadly, her mother June had passed away just a few months before that interview happened. You know, her dying without answers of what happened to her daughter or her grandchild. And I truly hope if Lisa's father is still living, he'd be 100 now if he is. I didn't see information on that, but it's just so tragic that both of her parents most likely will not get answers before they passed. What happened to their daughter and their grandchild? Let's take one more good look at both Lois and Lisa because it might spark someone's memory out there. Lois is described as a white female standing 5 foot 4 inches tall, around 120 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. She is believed to last be wearing a peach-colored nightgown and housecoat. Lisa is described as a white female standing 5 foot 10 inches tall, around 97 pounds, with hazel eyes and dark blonde hair, worn straight and shoulder length. She had 3 piercings on each ear, a thin build, and sometimes wore glasses. She was also 5 months pregnant at the time of her disappearance. She was last seen wearing a sweatshirt with a Mickey Mouse embossed on the front, blue jeans, white running shoes, and may have been wearing a 10-karat gold friendship ring and a 14-karat gold opal ring. She also had a tattoo on her shoulder of a mouse. If you have any information on these 2 young women's disappearances, please contact the authorities. If you know something, please say something. I'll have the information down below for both cases. And if you know anything else that I didn't include in today's video, please let me know down below. I'll be chatting with you all down there. Have you ever heard of these cases before? Because I hadn't. So if you're able to also help spread the word on these cases, please do. Share this video, share their missing persons flyers, go support the families. And as always, I hope you all stay safe out there, lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video.